While it might be true that wealthy people can buy anything and everything they want, this doesn't mean that they do exactly that. In fact, experts have found that in the majority of cases, those of a richer social status tend to be more money conscious, avoiding a couple of bad spending habits to hold on to their excessive wealth. But what are these bad spending habits that the wealthy shy away from? Well, whether you're looking for reasons to limit your own excessive spending or are interested in the differences between the wealthy and us normal folks, stay right where you are, as we're about to explore some of the worst spending habits that most rich people avoid. So strap yourselves in and get ready to learn, as things are about to get interesting. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with those notifications on so you won't miss out on any of the new videos we post. Number 1, impulse buying. The concept of impulse buying is, psychologically speaking, pretty simple to understand. When it comes to us normal people who work for a living, we like to motivate ourselves so that it feels like we're actually working towards something. What's the point of earning more money if we can't have a few luxurious items along the way, right? This is why those who find themselves on the lower end of the financial ladder to be more prone to impulse buying. They might see a cashmere sweater that they really like, for example, and convince themselves that because they have worked so hard this month, they deserve a little bit of a treat to keep their spirits up. And this definitely works, with many office employees shopping online in their free time to convince themselves that the long hours are worth it. Wealthy people don't really need this motivation to continue working, as their money has either been gifted to them or they are already the type of person who actually likes to work. According to billionaire investor Warren Buffett, if you buy things you do not need, soon you will have to sell things you actually do need. And this doesn't necessarily mean that wealthy people don't like to buy luxurious items for themselves. Take one look at celebrities like Kim Kardashian and the Real Housewives of whatever, and you'll see that luxurious items make their word go round. But impulse buying is almost never at play here, with thought either being put into purchases or shopping sprees being the result of boredom. Whereas Judy, round the corner, can't stop herself from maxing out her credit card to afford that brand new water cooler from Verimark. Number 2, extreme inheritances. The next spending habit is a bit of a controversial one, as it has to do with leaving money behind after you pass to ensure the survival of your friends and family. We are, of course, talking about extreme inheritances. And while it might be true that some wealthy people have inherited their wealth from their family, things seem to be changing with the onset of the recently wealthy. Celebrity investors and investors such as Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, for example, have indicated that they don't wish to leave a mountain of money for their children to rely on. In their own words, this is because they would prefer to have their children create their own wealth in the world. This is why both billionaires have, according to CNBC, decided to rather give a large portion of their fortunes to charity on their deaths, so that their prosperous lives could also mean something to those who were never fortunate enough to make use of their inventions. This is obviously a great way to see things, as growing up with lots of money often causes children to feel entitled. Suffice it to say, we're glad that these celebrities are setting the trend of avoiding handouts, which will hopefully cause their children to create just as much wealth for the world as their fathers did. Those who find themselves in the working class do, however, take great pride in the amount of money they make on a monthly basis. It's what allows them to survive, after all, with many people from this rung of the social ladder saving money from their paychecks so that they can be looked after on a rainy day. There is nothing worse than not having any savings and having to change the engine of your motor car, for example, which is why having a nest egg is so important to us. It is also often the case that these families place more of an emphasis on family and want their children to have a bit of a safety blanket that they wish they had growing up. As such, the working class often bequeaths everything they have upon their deaths to their family members, spending a little money on themselves and charity as possible. Number 3, purchasing TV channels and video games. Nothing says wealth to a middle-class man than owning all the television channels and streaming subscriptions possible, which is why quite a bit of money from their pockets is spent on this semi-luxurious set of items. The same can be said for video games, which are usually used as an escape of sorts from reality, allowing those from the working class to get lost in different worlds and forget about their worldly troubles. But the majority of wealthy people didn't amass their fortunes by sitting around staring at a screen all day, which is why they almost never waste their money on jump television packages or the latest and greatest in video game technology, regardless of how fun this might seem. This is actually backed up by statistics as well, with the 2015 data from Nielsen suggesting that adults in households with an annual income of below $25,000 spend far more time consuming media than those with an annual income over $75,000. In the words of the researchers involved. We expected high-income households to own more devices, but we did not anticipate that low-income consumers of all devices had a greater usage. When surveying those from the higher echelons of society, researchers also found that around 67% of wealthy individuals admitted to not watching television at all, considering it to be a giant waste of time. Hopefully that little statement doesn't apply to YouTube as well. Number 4. Luxury brands. Back in the day, a trend was created by some of the wealthiest and most popular celebrities, who were brought on to market brand clothing to the rest of the world. And although the majority of the public knew that these celebrities were being paid extravagant amounts of money to give the impression that they always wore these brands, the marketing campaign took off, and those of a lower social status decided to buy into the idea. This has resulted in people from the working class flocking to shops just so they're able to dress up like their favorite role models, giving the impression that they have just as much wealth as the celebrities who marketed these brands to them in the first place. But the reality of the situation is that the wealthiest members of society tend to stay away from brand clothing and only tend to wear brands that they have either been sponsored by the brand or need to attend a red carpet or another luxurious event where the status means something. Other than moments like these, the wealthy of the world tend to save money by wearing off-brand clothing like the rest of us. A great example of this is Bill Gates, who was recently caught wearing a $10 wristwatch. Since he is considered to be one of the richest people in the world, there's no doubt that he can afford a lot more than this and would probably wear a Rolex into a board meeting. But otherwise, his budget watch is just as good. Like Mr. Gates, the founder of IKEA also told Newsweek that he doesn't wear anything that isn't from a flea market, as he believes that this sets a good example for his staff and family. And while the working class might be aware that brand clothing is no longer a trend of the wealthy, the idea of owning the best has become so ingrained in our lives that we just don't think of it anymore. So maybe there is something we can learn from the wealthy. Number 5. Buying overpriced homes. Although it may be true that the wealthy often spend a lot more money on their homes than the working class, which, considering how much bigger their budgets are, is pretty obvious in its own right, it must be said that they have more of a tendency to look for deals than we do. US working class people think of how much we are willing to pay for a home, and then after speaking to a real estate agent, slowly but surely increase our budget. Then we are introduced to the perfect home that is a bit over this budget. We tend to fork out the extra money to be able to take residence in it. More often than not, this is due to the skill of the real estate agent, who has the job of selling the property for as much money as possible. And once we have been convinced that we are securing the home at a great price, but need to act fast or might lose it, the game is pretty much over. The wealthy have a lot of money in the bank though, so it is more often the case that they can't be swayed by the prospect of losing a property to another, since this means that the real estate agent in question has next to no bargaining power with the exorbitant prices of the properties already making for a fair commission. Properties are often bought by the wealthy at reduced prices. Suffice it to say, the wealthy almost never pay an overpriced amount for their homes, which essentially means that they are always up for making quite an insane profit when it comes to the resale of these assets at a later date. The working class, on the other hand, can often act too quickly, sinking too much money into the home and being left with an asset that they either can't afford or gets sold for less than they purchased it for. Number 6. Personal grooming. Last but not least, another trend that was created back in the day was having a pretty grueling grooming schedule if you were a wealthy socialite. Nowadays, things have changed though, with more of an emphasis being on self-love and the acceptance of a more natural look. This has led to quite a few wealthy individuals taking personal grooming into their own hands, such as billionaire John Caldwell, who cuts his own hair. The same cannot be said when it comes to the working class though, who often attend spa and grooming sessions as a way to get away from the stress of their working lives. So how many of these bad spending habits do you have? Feel free to let us know in the comment section down below.